In the heart of Eldritch High, where the hallways whispered secrets older than the town itself, there existed a room shrouded in tales darker than the shadows that danced beneath its door, room 404. A room that, according to legend, did not belong to our world but to another, where time crawled on hands and knees, if it dared to move at all. It was said that students assigned to detention in room 404 were never seen again, swallowed by an abyss from which there was no return. But like all tales woven from the fabric of fear and curiosity, the truth was far more sinister, a reality that Nolan, a skeptic by nature and a rebel by choice, was about to uncover. Nolan's transgression was minor, a prank gone wrong, harmless but for the pride it wounded. The punishment, however, felt disproportionate. Detention in room 404 must be a clerical error, he thought, as everyone knew room 404 was off-limits, a place of schoolyard ghost stories and whispered warnings. Yet, the slip of paper clenched in his hand was unambiguous, its black ink a stark decree against the paleness of his skin. He arrived as twilight bled its last light, painting the sky in hues of despair. The hallway leading to room 404 felt unfamiliar, longer, as if stretching towards infinity under the watchful gaze of flickering lights. The door, aged oak with numbers that shimmered with an eerie luminescence, stood slightly ajar, inviting or warning. He couldn't decide. Stepping inside, Nolan found the room unnaturally vast, far larger than its exterior suggested. Desks lay in precise rows, each shadowed by an oppressive silence that hung heavy in the air, a silence punctuated only by the soft, rhythmic ticking of a clock that Nolan couldn't locate. The walls, adorned with portraits, seemed to watch him, their eyes following his every move with an intensity that quickened his pulse. No sooner had he taken a seat, the door shut with a thunderous finality, plunging the room into darkness. When the lights flickered back to life, Nolan was not alone. Figures, spectral and blurred at the edges as if viewed through water, filled the once empty seats. Students, he realized, their faces twisted in expressions of fear and despair, their eyes hollow, gazing into voids only they could see. A voice, ancient and cold as the grave, echoed through the room, its source unseen. "Welcome to detention, Nolan. Your lesson begins now." The words slithered around him, a serpent constricting its prey. He tried to respond, to demand answers, but found his voice swallowed by the thick air. The room shifted then, walls undulating like the chest of some slumbering beast. Desks and specters vanished, replaced by an endless library, its shelves stretching into darkness, books bound in skins that whispered secrets meant to be forgotten. Nolan's heart raced as he realized the room was alive, a living, breathing entity, and he was trapped within its bowels. Time lost meaning as Nolan wandered the labyrinthine aisles, each turn revealing horrors more unspeakable than the last, paintings that moaned in agony, their canvases depicting scenes of torment, statues that wept blood, their cries for mercy echoing off stone, books that screamed when opened, their pages filled with nightmares made manifest that I in this realm of endless night. Nolan encountered others like him, students who had vanished, trapped in moments of eternal detention. Some had succumbed to madness, their minds fractured by the ceaseless terror, others searched still for an exit, hope a fragile flame flickering in the darkness. The realization dawned on Nolan then, a truth as chilling as the air that pressed against his skin. Room 404 was a prison, not of brick and mortar, but of fear and despair. A place where time did indeed stand still, for it fed on the moments stolen from its captives, growing stronger with each soul it devoured. Determination ignited within Nolan, a defiance against the darkness that sought to consume him. He refused to become another shadow, another whispered warning in the hallways of Eldritch High. With resolve as his shield and courage as his sword, he navigated the nightmares, each step a battle, each breath a victory. Hours, days, perhaps even years passed in his quest for freedom, time an unreliable narrator in the story of his escape. And when he finally emerged, blinking against the light of a sun he feared he'd never see again, Nolan was changed. The schoolyard seemed smaller, the world beyond the gates less intimidating, but room 404 remained, a door forever closed yet endlessly open, waiting for its next victim. Nolan knew the truth now, a truth he bore like a scar upon his soul. Some rooms should never be entered, for some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed. Eldritch High stood silent, a sentinel watching as Nolan walked away, his footsteps a testament to his survival. Yet within its walls, in a room that defied logic and time, the clock ticked on, a heart beating in the dark, waiting for the bell to ring, signaling the start of another never-ending detention. As Nolan distanced himself from the school, the weight of his experience hung heavily upon him, a cloak woven from threads of darkness and light. The world around him seemed altered, as if he had crossed through a veil into a reality subtly shifted. People passed by, caught up in the minutiae of their daily lives, oblivious to the shadows that danced at the edge of perception, shadows Nolan could now see all too clearly. He found himself walking the streets without direction, his mind a tumult of thoughts and memories, replaying his time in room 404. The specters of students trapped in perpetual detention haunted him, their faces etched into his memory, a gallery of the lost and the damned. He wondered about their stories, their lives before they became prisoners of the room. How many had been forgotten? How many tales had been unwritten, lost to the hunger of that eldritch space? Nolan's journey led him unwittingly back to the heart of the town, to the public library that stood as a beacon of knowledge and a bastion against ignorance. The irony was not lost on him. The sanctuary of one library contrasted starkly with the prison of another. The building beckoned to him, a whisper in the back of his mind urging him forward. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old books, a comforting aroma that wrapped around him like a warm blanket. He wandered the aisles, fingers trailing along the spines of countless volumes, each a world unto itself, a safe harbor from the storm that raged within him. It was here, amidst the quiet solace of the written word, that Nolan found his purpose. That he began to research, to delve into the history of Eldritch High and room 404. The library's archives, a dusty labyrinth of records and newspaper clippings, revealed a tapestry of events woven from tragedy and mystery. Disappearances dating back decades, each linked to the school, each a thread leading back to room 404. The room was a nexus, a point where the fabric of reality wore thin, allowing the darkness to seep through. Nolan's resolve hardened. He could not, would not, allow the cycle to continue. Armed with knowledge and fueled by the need to act, he reached out to those who had lost loved ones to the room, gathering their stories, their pain, and their hope. Together, they formed a coalition, a group bound by a common goal, to seal room 404 and prevent further loss. Their efforts were met with resistance, skepticism from authorities, and ridicule from peers. But Nolan pressed on, driven by the memories of those spectral students, by the promise of liberation from fear. He organized vigils, spoke at school board meetings, and wrote articles for the local paper, each action a stone cast into the waters of apathy, creating ripples that spread and grew. And then, the breakthrough. A sympathetic ear in the local government, a councilwoman with a personal connection to one of the missing, lent her support to Nolan's cause. With her backing, an investigation into Eldritch High and room 404 was launched, bringing to light the suffering and sorrow that had been hidden in the shadows. The room was closed, sealed off not just with locks and chains, but with rites and rituals, words of power spoken by those who walked the line between worlds. A barrier was erected, a ward against the darkness, containing the malevolence within. Nolan stood outside the school, watching as the final seal was put in place, a mixture of relief and sorrow in his heart. Relief that no more would be lost to room 404, sorrow for those who remained trapped within its walls, beyond help or hope. The sun set on Eldritch High, casting long shadows across the grounds. Nolan turned his back on the school, on the room that had taken so much from so many. He walked away, his steps echoing in the silence of the coming night, but the battle was not over. Nolan knew that darkness lurked in many corners of the world, in places seen and unseen. Room 404 was but one of many doors best left unopened. With resolve in his heart and a newfound purpose, Nolan dedicated himself to the fight against the unseen, a guardian against the darkness, a beacon for those lost in the shadows, and though he walked alone, the spirits of those he had fought for walked with him, a silent legion bearing witness to the courage of one who dared to stand against the darkness and emerge into the light. In the quaint, mist-covered town of Silverpine, nestled between whispering forests and brooding hills, there existed a peculiar antique shop known as the Timekeeper's Vault. The shop was an emporium of forgotten stories, housing relics from times long past. Its walls were lined with dusty clocks, faded paintings, and old photographs that seemed to stare back at those who dared to look. Eleanor, a young photographer with a fascination for the arcane, stumbled upon the shop one dreary afternoon. She was immediately drawn to an ancient, brass-framed camera, its body etched with symbols that seemed to dance in the dim light. The shopkeeper, a withered man with knowing eyes, warned her that the camera was cursed, said to capture more than just images. But Eleanor, ever the skeptic, was entranced by the challenge and purchased it without a second thought. That night, under the glow of a full moon, Eleanor set out to test her new acquisition. She took photos of the mundane, the winding streets of Silverpine, the gnarled trees at its edge, and the starlit sky above. However, when she developed the photos, she discovered something horrifying. In every shot, there appeared a ghostly figure, its form blurred but unmistakably human, its eyes hollow pools of despair. Terrified but intrigued, Eleanor embarked on a quest to uncover the origin of the apparition. Each night, she took more photos, and each day, the figure grew clearer, as if approaching from a great distance. She researched the history of the camera, learning of its last owner, a photographer named Jonathan Harker who vanished under mysterious circumstances decades ago. As the apparition grew closer, Eleanor began to experience chilling occurrences, whispers in the dark, objects moving on their own, and a constant feeling of being watched. Despite her fear, she continued, compelled by a force she couldn't understand. Finally, one night, the figure appeared in full clarity. It was Jonathan Harker, or what remained of him, trapped within the confines of the camera. With eyes that pleaded for release, he revealed the truth through a series of haunting images. He had been consumed by an ancient entity, a collector of souls, which now sought Eleanor as its next vessel. Eleanor realized that to save herself and free Jonathan, she had to confront the entity. Armed with her camera, she captured a photo of the mirror where she first saw the apparition beside her reflection. As the flash illuminated the darkness, the entity materialized, a vortex of shadows and malice. With every ounce of courage, Eleanor focused the camera, the entity's screams piercing the night. She pressed the shutter button, trapping it within a photograph. The entity disintegrated, its hold on our world severed, leaving behind a single, blackened photo. Exhausted and shaken, Eleanor found Jonathan's spirit freed, his apparition no longer appearing in the photos. She had vanquished the entity, but the cost was great. The camera was destroyed in the process, its curse lifted but its legacy forever imprinted in the annals of Silverpine's history. Eleanor emerged from the ordeal changed. She continued to photograph, but never again with the reckless curiosity of youth. Instead, she captured images with respect for the unseen worlds that parallel our own, knowing that some mysteries are better left undisturbed. The ghostly figure in her photos served as a grim reminder of the thin veil between life and the afterlife, and of the courage it takes to confront the unknown. Months turned into years, and Eleanor's encounter with the supernatural became a legend in Silverpine, whispered among the townsfolk with a mix of fear and fascination. Yet, for Eleanor, the events of that fateful night were more than just a story, they were a turning point in her life. She had faced the unknown, touched the other side, and returned. But the shadows of the past never truly leave, and Eleanor knew this better than anyone. As the years passed, Eleanor became a guardian of sorts, a protector of the veil between worlds. She researched ancient texts and artifacts, learning all she could about the supernatural forces that lurk in the shadows. Her photography took on a new purpose, not just to capture beauty, but to reveal and understand the mysteries that exist just beyond human perception. However, peace is often fleeting for those who walk the line between light and darkness. A new mystery emerged when children in the town began to speak of seeing a shadow man in their dreams, a figure that seemed eerily familiar to the one Eleanor had encountered. This time, however, the apparition was not confined to photographs. It appeared in reflections, on television screens, and even in the shadows of rooms. Eleanor realized that by capturing the entity in a photograph, she had not destroyed it but merely changed its form. It was now bound to the realm of reflections, seeking a way back into the world. The entity had grown stronger, feeding off the fears of those it haunted, and it was only a matter of time before it found a way to break free. Determined to stop the entity once and for all, Eleanor delved deeper into her research. She discovered an ancient ritual that could banish the entity to the void, a place of nothingness where it could no longer harm anyone. The ritual required a mirror that had never reflected a living soul, a candle made from the wax of 1,000 dead bees, and the recitation of an incantation that had been lost to time. The search for these items took Eleanor on a journey through the dark underbelly of the supernatural world, where she encountered spirits, demons, and entities of all kinds. Each step brought her closer to the ritual but also deeper into danger. Yet, Eleanor's resolve never wavered. She had faced death once and was prepared to do so again if it meant saving the innocent. On a stormy night, with the veil between worlds at its thinnest, Eleanor performed the ritual. The entity, drawn to the power of the incantation, emerged from the shadows, its form more terrifying than ever. It was a battle of wills, with Eleanor using every ounce of her strength and knowledge to bind the entity to the void. As the final words of the incantation were spoken, a blinding light filled the room, and the entity was gone, banished to a place from which there was no return. The aftermath left Eleanor weakened but victorious. She had saved Silverpine and perhaps even the world from a darkness beyond comprehension. Her actions that night became the stuff of legend, a tale of courage and determination that would be told for generations. Eleanor's life eventually returned to a semblance of normalcy, but she remained vigilant, always watching for signs of the supernatural. She knew that the world was full of mysteries and that darkness could lurk in the most unexpected places. But she also knew that there were always those willing to stand in the light, to face the darkness, and to protect the world from the shadows that seek to consume it. And so, Eleanor continued her work, a beacon of hope in a world filled with shadows, reminder that even in the darkest of times, there are those who will stand against the night.